Everybody, welcome to What's Up Wednesday. This week, I want to talk a little bit about the relationship between production, quality, and health and safety in a work environment. And what prompts this, even though I know I've spoken about this topic, more specifically, the importance of planning, what really prompts this for me is that my 21-year-old son is serving an internship this summer as a mechanical engineer. He's working for a tooling company that make specialized tooling for the transportation industry. I'll leave it at that. And, as part of his role, he's doing a lot of manual, like assembly type of work, which you wouldn't think a manufacturing engineer would be doing. But I think it's really good practical experience to kind of understand what the whole process looks like. So one day he invited me up to kind of visit the site and see the work that he was doing. And I walked in the building. The first thing that I noticed when I walked in is there was literally no security. Nobody asked who I was, why I was there. I basically walked in and had to ask somebody where my son was, and then they directed me. And that was a big concern to me, that there literally was zero security. And as I walked in, it was an absolute housekeeping nightmare. There was stuff everywhere. The paths of travel were uh, they were covered with overflow equipment and materials and supplies. You had to literally weave your way in and out of things that shouldn't be there. And immediately, my lean Kanban manufacturing had kicked in, and it's like, wow, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. And as I looked around more, I noticed a lot of safety related issues. I noticed a lot of productivity efficiency issues because of the way they were doing work. I recognized very quickly that their culture was very, I want to call it lax, meaning that people can kind of dictate their own work schedules and they kind of know what they need to do, but ultimately it was very, very loose and up for interpretation, so to speak. Now, I was very pleased to hear that there was a fair amount of safety training that was going on in order to operate a MOOP or a forklift. You had to be certified. And luckily my son's seen some of that, but he comes home with his observations and we end up having conversations about those things. So I'm finding myself explaining to him a lot of the basics of that relationship between production, quality, and safety. And I think he's starting to get it. But it's really good for me to go back to the basics and the fundamentals of sharing the importance and the interrelation of these things. What I explained to him yesterday was that production is number one. Ultimately, a company is profitable based on their production. There are a lot of factors that affect that, but if they don't produce, they don't make money. And if they're private industry, they don't stay in business. But the other big thing that stood out to me is he talks to me daily about rework, about the fact that they made a mistake, that something was done wrong. They ordered the wrong part and installed it, and they have to redo all that work. So it costs them time and materials. And it's just this snowball effect that you see where quality goes out the door because of a lack of planning, and that affects the productivity and the schedule. And ultimately, people take risks and you have safety issues. Now, I haven't heard of any incidents or accidents, which is really good. But you look at the interrelationship of these things, and going back to what I've talked about in the past, it starts with planning, it starts with management and leadership. And he's expressed to me that they don't see management or leadership on the production floor, and that there's a big separation between senior leadership and management and the people actually doing the work, on the production floor. These are senior engineers, manufacturing engineers, electricians, assembly type workers. And you can kind of get a real feel of the overall culture. And it concerns me, and it makes me really want to do something or say something. But at the same time, I know that in this case that it probably wouldn't be welcome. Now, for me and for all of you out there, I encourage you to, I guess, promote or request that fresh sets of eyes come in and tell you what they're thinking. because I think that the benefits to this organization, if I came in and said, here's what I saw, here are my thoughts, some things for you to consider. I encourage you to go walk the floor, look at the things I'm talking about, and maybe come up with a plan of things you may want to do to tighten up expectations a little bit, to maybe manage the processes and expectations around housekeeping, around material storage, around rework, making sure that you plan and do things right the first time so you're not having to redo them. That costs this company a lot of money, and they have over 500 employees. I can only imagine across all of their facilities how big of an issue this actually is. So again, I don't think I would be welcomed if I called senior management and said, hey, I walked through and I observed some things. Do you want to hear about them? But ultimately, there's nothing I would like more than to go in and say, hey, let me help you improve. Let me share with you what I've observed and what I've heard. And I think I should encourage my son to do that. But at the same time, I did that exact same thing in my internship in safety. And I gave a very unfiltered review at the end of my internship of the culture of the company. And when I came back a couple of years later and worked with a lot of those people in a different capacity, I wasn't welcomed by many because I kind of threw a grenade into the way they were doing things. And I think there would be risk in my son potentially getting a job there in the future if he chooses to go back. But ultimately, think about that. Think about how important production is and how big of a deal both safety and quality are to production, to efficiency, to profitability, how they all relate, and the importance of planning, expectation setting, and communication. I think that those are the big keys that we should all focus on a regular basis. And if we're doing those things well, then we'll have a leading culture. If we don't, we'll have a culture that's either diluted or maybe starts to head towards toxic. And that's the last thing we want, because no company can really survive that forever. Hopefully that's helpful. We'll see you next Wednesday.